Welcome to another episode of Corporate CPR, where we breathe life back into your organization, projects, and processes, giving you insights to recovery and avoiding corporate mentality events. Today, we'll be talking about getting unstuck and out of your own way. And joining us to contribute to the conversation is Theresa Lear Levine. Welcome, Theresa.
Thank you so much for having me, Jen. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, can you share with folks a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I am, I guess, title-wise, I'm an EFT Master Practitioner. I'm a hypnotherapist, and I'm also a mom of four and a wife. And I have been helping other professional women to get out of their own way in various different ways for the last 25 plus years. And my business is called Becoming More Me. And that's pretty much what I've been trying to do all this time too. And the things that really helped me to get out of my own way are the things that I now use to not only continue to help myself, because this is a never-ending journey, right? But also to help other people to do that. And I live outside of Washington, D.C. in Maryland. And yeah, I work from my home, and that's my life.
Well, it's so great to have you. Well, let's start at the basics, because I think some of the work that you do, people may have never even heard of. So can we talk a little bit about
Yeah.
EFT and what that even means?
Sure. Yeah, it's quite common that people haven't heard of it. And it's also kind of ironic because regulating our nervous system, which is essentially what we're doing with emotional freedom techniques or tapping, it's innate in us. We find ourselves doing things all the time that are regulating, whether we're, clutching our hands, or we find ourselves rubbing our temples or things. All of these things are releasing stress from our body. So the premise behind emotional freedom techniques is this combination of ancient Chinese medicine using the meridian system of our body through which our life flows, the same system and endpoints which get accessed if you were to have a deep tissue massage or go for acupuncture or something like that. The things that we are more familiar with releasing physical pain, they're also the places where our emotions and our feelings get stuck, where our beliefs and things get stuck. And we can release those literally by thinking about the negative thing and tapping on these various points, which are located all over our body. And by focusing on the negative and doing this in a certain sequence, it completely changes the consciousness around what we're working on and elevates us to totally different perspectives. So this technique can be used effectively, and it's scientifically proven, tons and tons of scientific studies on this. It's not just like woo woo, I'm, going to tap on some things and talk and it's all going to change. But it can change the way that you feel with anything, whether it's emotional or physical. So if it's something that happened a really long time ago for you, if it's something that you're future pacing or anxious about, which would be future, or if it's something that's presently happening right now, as well as whether it's emotional or physical. So it pretty much opens the doors wide open to almost anything that you want or need to work on. Now, I personally find myself working with people on a lot of limiting beliefs, a lot of past traumas, fears, things like that, even phobias, very effectively. And they find new ways to kind of show up in their life and proceed in a different manner. And it's great for frustration or, like low tolerance to things, impatience, all the things that tend to kind of get in our way. So there's so many different ways to use it, and it's so quick. That for me, I have ADHD, and I always want everything done already. I'm impatient. And when I found this technique and knew that like I could solve a problem in minutes versus just talk therapy after talk therapy after talk therapy, I was hooked because it was so fast and so effective.
Interesting. Well, let's back up a little bit before we get into that, because I imagine that, it's, like you said, it came from originating in Chinese medicine, and it's probably not made a huge inroad in the States yet. I know I have heard of it before, so it definitely is here, but my guess is there's people who are probably like, what do you mean my emotional state has something to do with my physical state? So can we talk a little bit about maybe I don't know whether it's
mind-body connection.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So anything that we feel, any negative emotion or any physical dis-ease stems from an energetic blockage in our body. So when things happen and we heal normally, then the energy flows as it should. When things happen and we don't, whether that's a broken bone or a traumatic incident where maybe you were, I don't know, chased by a dog and it bit you or something like that, we get these energetic blockages, and that is at the basis of any dis-ease in our body. So, the ancient Chinese medicine is one part of it, but the other component of EFT is modern psychology. So, that's stuff that we're definitely
Mm,
familiar with, here in the Western world. And the practice has been around as we know it as EFT since the 90s. So it's not like it's brand new, and it
right.
obviously includes things that are thousands of years old. But it is definitely gaining a lot of popularity as people, learn more about it. And I personally love combining it with other things like, meditation and visualization and more subconscious mind work with hypnotherapy and things like that to just really get deeper into things. I don't think people realize how much certain things that have happened that they've never quite fully processed are just playing in the background, just like running like a recording in the back of their
Mm.
mind. And they have never thought about that potentially not actually being the truth.
Well, and I guess I have a couple of questions there. One, how do you identify, I guess, that you have an issue that, like, you have an event or an experience that you haven't processed through? Because maybe you think you're fine, because you've done a good job of masking it or moving forward. So that's one question. And on the flip side, what if you have symptoms and you can't trace those back? Like there is some sort of an emotional thing happening, but you don't know maybe what triggered it. How do those two things work?
Okay, so if you don't know what the issue is, there's usually something that you do know that's not right or that keeps happening over and over again, kind of this recurring Groundhog Day of like, why won't this thing stop happening? Or why can't I, get through the day without, insert whatever it is. And from there, we just kind of work backwards. When I'm working with a client, I like to go back as far in time as possible, pretty much to when we entered into the physical world as a baby, because whatever we can clear, and we don't remember a whole lot from then, that's for sure. But it's interesting how much the body remembers. And as you go into this work and you can release there, I always think of it like kind of domino rally. Like if we can push over that domino that's way back there from when we were first born and it's related to some other things that have happened along the way, we probably don't need to work on those. And when it comes to like, I don't know what the source of something is, we can literally start there with the work. When we're setting up a round of EFT tapping, it always starts with like a setup statement. So we might start by saying, even though I have no idea how I got to this place or why I feel this way, I want to love, accept, and forgive myself. At the end of any real work being done here is the finding of true love, acceptance, and forgiveness, which completely shifts and changes our feelings physically and emotionally about everything. And most people don't actually have true love, true acceptance, or true forgiveness for things that are going on in their life, whether it's a physical condition or an emotional condition. And that's why there's still pain and there's still stuckness and there's still all the things that we find ourselves challenged with or at war with ourselves about.
Mm. All right. And then what about in an instance where maybe you don't realize an event is having an issue for you, like, yeah, maybe something like, yeah, my parents got divorced when I was 3 and I think I've moved on and I'm fine about it, but maybe I'm not, right? Like, how would I know that whether I am or I'm not?
When I'm working with somebody, we always kind of do a consultation and I gather up all these things, just kind of like spill it. What do you got? What happened in the past? Whether you think it's relevant or not, things that you might consider. And then I have different ways I kind of go over those things and kind of give them a little litmus test. Like, is this actually producing anything? And sometimes, we can go through a few rounds of tapping and nothing really emerges. Sometimes people are, swear up and down, like, I know I've already processed that, or I've worked with that with like 10 other therapists before, and I'm sure that I'm over it. And we're 10 seconds in and they're bawling their eyes out.
Hmm.
So it's just a matter of like, I know certain things to kind of test or kind of poke at, so to speak, and that kind of trigger things. I mean, I kind of consider it part of my job to trigger people when I'm working with them and to find the things that aggravate them and still kind of set them off so that we can regulate them and make them feel good about it again.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the process then. What does going through this experience look like?
Well, A simple round of EFT tapping is actually, well, it's simple as stated. And you and I talked about this. We're actually going to do a round together after we're done recording. So listeners will be able to go do this with us, because I think it's one thing for us to talk about it and for people to go, oh, that's interesting, or that's weird even, or whatever they might be thinking. And it's another thing to actually press play on a video and experience the way that things feel different for you when you do this. But, kind of like I was saying, there's that setup statement. So a round of EFT can take anywhere from like a minute to 10 minutes, depending on how elaborate you want to be with the things that you're saying or thinking. But let's just say, for instance, that you're working on a headache, and I think a headache is an awesome thing for people to try this on at first, because if you actually have that physical pain, and then you can do usually just one round of tapping and completely shift it or eliminate it, it's really empowering. And it also usually knocks out the skepticism that most people have about, like, what's this simple thing and how's it actually going to work and whatever else. So you might start by tapping on the side of the hand. It's the karate chop point. And you set it up. You say something like, even though I have this headache, I want to love, accept, and forgive myself. You say something like that 3 times through. And then there's these 8 other points that have been the ones that are scientifically proven to give you a real energetic overhaul, which are the top of the head, the eyebrow, the side of the eye, under the nose, under the mouth, the collarbone, and under the arm. You go through those points, tapping them, 5 to 7 times each, as you basically dish the negative about this headache. You're going to talk about how that headache feels, where you feel it, what it feels like. Does it have a color, a texture, just describe that negative feeling as well as you can while you tap through those points, and you will literally feel it changing. And as it changes, you kind of are chasing that pain up and out of your body and turning it around. Hopefully, by the time that you're going that 3rd time through, you're allowing the possibility that maybe you could release this headache. You're opening up to the idea that maybe you don't have to have this thing all morning or all day or whatever, and genuinely opening up to it. If you're not feeling it and it's still feeling horrible, you just stay with the negative and maybe do another round. But usually by the end of a round, you can kind of open up. The perspective changes, the feeling changes, the symptoms shift, and there's like a whole new possibility in front of you.
So that you just described,
nice
yeah, I guess a physical manifestation then. So, but you were talking about emotional ones too. So does it work the same then, or how is that process?
Absolutely. But like with the headache, you're going to know that you took care of it right then and there, because you can really feel it. And the difference is the headache's there or the headache's not. Whereas maybe if you have a block to visibility, or a block to manifesting money, or to taking the next step forward in your career or whatever else, you can do the work and no doubt it's working, but it might take that next job interview or that next opportunity when you have to call in that money, or that next opportunity where you have to get visible, for you to understand and see and prove to yourself that the work worked.
And so do you come across clients where it isn't solved in I guess one sitting, I suppose, and what would be the inhibitors of that, and how do you work through that?
Absolutely. I mean, most of us, I'm in my 40s. I tend to work with women from their 30s through their 60s. And we got a lot of stuff that's gone on in those decades that we've been here. And while a lot can be shifted, changed, or even completely eradicated in a session, Rome wasn't built in a day. So this works a lot faster than talk therapy, a lot more effective, and just quicker in general. But, when I'm working with somebody as far as like my Becoming More Me program, we're going back to the beginning. We're working forward. We're going over all the things and making sure that there's kind of no stone left unturned. And, even from there, everybody's always got work to do. But the beauty of this technique is that it's your hands, it's your body, it's your thoughts, and you can do this literally anytime you want. So part of what I do when I'm working with my clients is I'm teaching them how to use this technique so that they can do it anytime they feel something coming up. Because you can use this technique very much like a Band-Aid. Let's say, you're afraid of flying, or you're afraid of public speaking or something like that, and you're getting ready to get on that plane, or you're getting ready to give a talk. You can very much use it like a Band-Aid, and you can feel a heck of a lot better and move through what you need to do with a much more regulated state to do it from. And then when you have a little bit more time, perhaps when I'm meeting with you to do some deeper work, or when you have time to do deeper work on your own, then you can dig into what's really behind that so that you can really get that kind of deep wound clean out sort of effect that makes it so it doesn't happen again.
Mhm.
So it works both ways, but I love that we can use this technique to be able to use it more, so to speak. So oftentimes we see people like go to get medication so that they can actually open up and talk about things that are traumatic or difficult for them. And in this case, we can literally use EFT tapping to release anxiety, to lower stress, and to feel good enough to be able to look at things that maybe have been too difficult for us to look at for our entire life. And the fact of the matter is that just 10 minutes of tapping can lower your cortisol, your stress hormones, up to 43%. And that's
Wow.
huge. And that's not just going to impact the one problem that you're thinking of, it's going to impact your entire being and that whole mind-body connection. And it's going to have every part of your life changing for the better.
Mm. So after people go through this process, like what kind of changes do you see then? We were talking about getting unstuck. And so, I mean, what are the results?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's so many different ways that this can show up. But when I'm looking at the energy system, I'm thinking about like our energy portals. Some people call them chakras. We have all these different portals of energy throughout our body, and they essentially are the way that we manifest or we make things physical in our world. So when we're stuck, when we're having that inertia essentially of what we can or can't do, it's usually a stuckness in our energy system and our lower energy portals, our lower chakras. So I usually work there to help kind of fire things back up so that people have the right fuel to move forward with things. And the results can be so many different things. I mean, I've helped CEOs that were not able to fly be cool with getting on planes. I've helped women who wanted to give TED Talks and things be able to get on stage and do that without freaking out about it. I have helped women to get through, ceilings financially where, they wanted to earn more and they were, already doing great, but they just kept hitting that ceiling. And, we get through it with addressing the different money blocks. And I've helped a lot of women transition from one business to another, whether they're, leaving corporate and starting their own business or just leveling up with what they're doing. And it's really a matter of how they were getting in their way in the first place or allowing their subconscious beliefs and things to slow them down and what we need to do to get them out of their way and what their goal is. A big part of my work is understanding from the very beginning what the goal is that you want to come out of this work, because I typically work with my clients for about 6 months. And I love when they have something they're working on at that time, because then I am there every step of the way. If they're trying to do that public speaking and they know exactly what comes up when they go to try to do it, then I'm right there to address that and help them work through it and figure out what that block is and help them remove it. And being able to work through things real time and see what comes up when you remove one thing and allow the next thing to rise to the surface is so very interesting.
And so I guess talk to me a little bit about, I suppose, limiting beliefs and that whole concept. You're talking about people, hitting ceilings or maybe not reaching their financial goals. How is what they're believing feeding into that? Or is there like self-sabotage, or what does that look like?
Oh yeah, there's all of that. And again, I mean, there's usually some kind of an underlying belief about their worthiness or about how hard they feel they have to work in order to be able to be worthy of that additional amount of money, or something from earlier in life. I mean, everything that happened in our life before we were about the age of 7, that was all just subconscious, unconscious programming. And we just took it all in like it was fact or truth. And it kind of created this belief system for us. And a lot of people have never really taken the time to examine what's really real there and what doesn't even belong to them. Stuff that, our parents may have imparted to us or whatever else. So yeah, examining that and then, realizing that we get to choose what we believe and being able to open up the mental and subconscious doors to being able to have that choice and that possibility and to increase the confidence. I mean, my work all centers around creating greater calm, confidence, and clarity. And when you can have those things aligned in, your work life, your personal life, that kind of elusive work-life balance, a lot of that can get sorted out through your own sense of emotional freedom. And emotional freedom includes releasing those limiting beliefs and being able to recognize them so that you can release them.
Hmm. You made me think of something. I don't know if it's related or not, but I'm kind of like this, and my daughter's kind of like this in the reverse, in that there's a lot of things that maybe we can't do that we think we're capable of. And sometimes I kind of wonder if that's actually a good thing, if it does enable to achieve more, like that you don't realize the gap between what you know and what you really need to know to actually accomplish that goal. Or if it does, because I know other people get really frustrated. Like my parents used to get really frustrated because I thought I was the expert at everything, and not just your typical I'm a teenager and so so I know it all, more like as in that whole belief of I can do whatever I want to do, and not necessarily always knowing how big the gap was between where I was at that moment and what it would take to reach that. So I
And
don't.
has that ever been a problem for you?
Well, and that's the part I don't know, I guess, right? Like, so I think in some ways I've probably done more than maybe I would have if I was different, right? Because I don't see as many roadblocks. I'm like, oh,
It sounds like a fantastic
everything's figure
problem to
outable.
have.
Right. But on the
I
flip
mean,
side, I sometimes think that I'm more competent, I think, than I am in certain areas. And one silly example would be, I always wanted to be a singer. And so I think I can sing. And
me
then
too.
but then when I like actually listen to the recording or something, I realize in my head I'm much better than I probably really am, and it takes a lot of getting that feedback from people of like, no, you're really not that great, but in my head I'm great. So
Yeah. But that's great, because that's how you feel about you is really the only thing that matters.
yeah, but I want other people to think I'm a good singer too.
Yeah.
So,
But I think from your confidence level, you could definitely hone that so that you felt like the singing was better than it actually is, whatever that means right now. But
right.
I think that's a fabulous problem to have. I'm a law of attraction coach along with the other things. So I'm always looking at the ways that people can magnetize more of what they want into their life. And the big area where I think people get hung up is the perceived gap between what is this reality that's really not so real anyway, and where they want to be.
Mm.
And that can often be the thing that I have to work on the hardest with people, because you really have to be able to release the hold on that drum you're beating here on the, oh, but this is this way, this is this way, it's not that way, it's this way, and be able to kind of put yourself into the vortex of where you want to be so that you can get there. So it sounds like for you, you just kind of put yourself there and then you go. And that's exactly how we manifest in a very healthy way. We're visualizing ourselves already there, already doing it, in the feeling, in the doing, and then, hey, there we are.
Mm. It's interesting you mentioned visualization, because I find, and I don't know if this is exactly what you mean or not, but when I need to do something, and it could be anything, it could be like, I know I have a tough day, really busy in the morning, so I'm going to do this, this, and this, and I actually visualize myself doing each of those steps to get
Yes.
to that outcome, and I do it in a lot of things that I do, and I find that for me it helps me then plan that next morning out, because I'm like, I'm doing everything I pictured already. But is that what you're talking
Absolutely.
about, or?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. When we can, I mean, and that's just for that day, but you can also put yourself into that vortex of feeling like, what do you want to feel like in 5 years or 10
Mm.
years? Or what are you really, really dreaming about? It might not even be realistic. And just put yourself into connecting with those feelings, because that's what changes your frequency. And, if you're like a radio station and you're always dialed into this is how it is, this is how it's going to be, then this is how it is, this is how it's going to be, is exactly what's going to mirror back and play to you. But if you elevate that frequency and your vibration to like, I'm going to rock this day, and this is how this day is going to go. I'm seeing it right now. I'm aligning with that frequency and I'm elevating to it. Or this is how my year is going to be, or my quarter, or whatever. This is where I'm going to be in 10 years. Then there's no doubt about it, you will get there. But when you keep tuned into the station of what is right now, that's when people get really stuck. So,
So what about, because like, it sounds a little bit tied to the positive affirmations. And one of the things I struggle with some, and my daughter though, even more so, is this, it feels like you're lying to yourself.
oh yeah, yep. You can't make
So,
a leap that's too big.
okay. So how does that work?
Yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with affirmations because if you feel them and they feel right, then go for it. I'm a much bigger fan of something called affirmations. Have you ever heard of those?
No.
So that is when you put it into a question. And so instead of like the ridiculous kind of things that people love to say to themselves, like,
I'm a patient person
yeah,
because I certainly am
exactly.
not.
I'll be happy to roll with that one, Jenna. Instead of being like, I am so patient,
Right.
you could say, what would it take for me to have all the patience I need to feel good about this day?
Hmm.
And put that out there as a question in the morning or before you go to sleep at night or whatever. That's it. By asking that question, you're putting your brain and your subconscious to work for you. You don't need to think about it anymore. When you ask your mind questions, your mind comes up with answers. When you give
Oh,
your mind statements, it's like, whatever, what's even worse is the inner judge or the inner critic going, you're not patient. Don't you remember how you blew up the other day? Or don't you remember that fit you threw back whenever? Or, how could you possibly say that you are patient? That's such, baloney. But when you ask the question, your subconscious and your mind deliver the answers. I love asking myself questions before I go to sleep at night. And then it's kind of like, hey, I'm getting work done while I am dreaming and resting and recharging for the next day. And the mind will provide the answers and the universe will provide the answers. And that may sound woo-woo, but put stuff out there and it will come back to you.
hmm. Well, I guess maybe even then carrying on with that, there's a lot of times where I'm faced with a dilemma, right? And I'm trying to decide, uh, like, what's the right way to feel and therefore to act on this. And so a silly
Mm.
example, maybe, one time my husband wanted to go play golf and we had made a deal that he was only playing golf twice that week and this would be a third time. And it really didn't have any impact on me, right? Like it really wasn't inhibiting me from doing whatever I was doing or whatever. It was more like, well, we agreed on this. And so, right. So I'm getting a little like, I'm annoyed because you're going back on what we agreed on, but should I really be annoyed because it's not having an adverse impact on me in reality? And so I'm actually faced with those type of things a lot of the time of, well, I know how I feel, but is that the right thing to act on? And so curious if any of this helps, with those decisions.
Yeah, so if I was faced with that, I'd probably kind of go into a tapping round on my own and just kind of reflect on it,
Mm.
Even though he said he was only going to play twice and he's playing three times, and I'm feeling a little indignant and annoyed and righteous about this, I want to love and accept myself anyway, even though this wasn't the plan, I'm really not feeling angry about it, and I don't know how I feel. I love, accept, and forgive myself, and just tap through those things. But I think at the end of this is another thing I really like to develop with people, which is their sense of intuition. I mean, you can see right there that you have the choice. It's not going to bother him. He's going to play golf, right? He's going to go have a good time and play golf. So you have the choice of, do I want to sit and stew in this negative feeling of being right? I'm just going to be right
Right.
about this because you said it was two times and it's three times, and I'm not
Right.
going to let go of this because I am right. And that doesn't feel good. Or do you want
Mm.
to be like, whatever, this really doesn't affect my week. Go enjoy golf another time. I'm going to do my thing too. And that probably feels a lot lighter, a lot more downstream. And the other thing feels more upstream. Pretty much whenever you can gauge that, like, is this an upstream thought or a downstream thought? Always go with the flow, like whenever you can, because it's going to take you to the places that feel good. And you already know from the visualizations that you do, when you visualize the things that feel good, the things that feel good happen. And, if we visualize the worst case scenario, then we're just stuck with all those feelings instead of
Mm.
letting them flow along with us. But yeah,
Okay.
developing intuition and that connection to our gut is really important, because I think a lot of times women get disconnected from that. And our gut was formed from the same bundle of neurons that formed this brain that we love to put like all of our trust in, even though it gets the answers later than the other brain does. And it's usually not as accurate. And the brain is always, our brain does not care if we are happy. It does not care if we are fulfilled. It does not care if we meet the goal. Our brain just cares that we're safe and alive and breathing. So when we're trusting that for all the decisions that we're making, or looking to logic and rationality and all that kind of stuff for things when we don't actually feel that way, then it usually fails us. And that's how we get into the self-sabotage and the other thing. So really connecting with our gut and our intuition allows us to make much better decisions in our personal and professional lives.
Well, my thought on intuition though is even that there's actually probably a lot more brain in that than we actually even realize, because my thought, and I guess I should say I haven't researched it or anything. This is more me putting together a bunch of things to come to this conclusion,
But
is
that's
that
intuition, so go for
right,
it.
right, is that we our or the intuition forms, or we get that gut reaction based on a bunch of little pieces of data that we've actually put together that our brain doesn't realize we put together. And I take that back from things like, they talk about micro expressions. And so you might end up feeling uncomfortable around somebody. You may not realize why, but it's because your brain has picked up somebody's micro expression. And maybe you think they've given you an aggressive expression, or a hateful one or something, right? And you didn't consciously go through, oh, that's what I saw and this is how I feel. But your body responds to it and is like, oh, I should probably avoid this person. I might be in danger. And so I think that's just one example, but I think it can come across, how we're observing people, the data, the inputs, and all these other things that we come across, our past experiences, come together. And that is what gives you this gut feeling.
Yeah, and our intuition gets stifled by that feeling that we're not safe and everything else, which is again like a very lower chakra, first chakra, which is our body. It's the beginning of our nervous system, essentially, that lower energy portal, and all those experiences that started from the moment that we were born. I mean, if you think about it, even if we don't remember what happened when we were born, some people have stories and feelings attached to that, and some people are like, whatever, I don't remember. But for any one of us, that's when we became super vulnerable and super dependent on people to bring what we needed to us. Like we no longer were connected to the
Right.
source of the food and all that stuff, and completely helpless. And whether it was the love and the nurturing that we wanted, or the actual food that we needed to fill our bellies, we had no control. So that feeling of lack of safety is at some level in all of us. And when we can work on that and we can upgrade the child, so to speak, into our life now, when we know like it's under control, when we're good, then we feel a lot better to make decisions from a grounded place that, feels a lot more safe and secure.
Mm. Interesting. I guess, and maybe my final question before we wrap it up, are just like, what are the biggest blockers that people have around this whole process, or the things that get in the way of this being successful for them?
Well, I've never had anyone that I've worked with not have success, but if you didn't want to do the work, that could certainly get in your way. I
Mm.
mean, that's a big thing. I would never I mean, if you don't want to do the work, you're not going to have success. But this is kind of
Mm.
one of those things where even skeptics can kind of go through the motions and get results. But I think the more passion and belief you put behind the work you're doing, the better results you're going to get with anything. And this is no different. But yeah, I mean, I think just leaning into it is really important, and kind of trusting the process, like with so many things. But other than that, I mean, again, these are scientifically proven methods, and if we get the right things and we hit the right points, I mean, I guess that could be a reason it didn't work if we didn't get down to the root, because every dis-ease or thing has a root cause. So usually, like with talk therapy, the root isn't gotten to, and even if it is, you haven't regulated your nervous system along with voicing the emotions. So there's still a piece that's missing. So then something triggers you and it comes back. When we get to the root with EFT, it's done. It's not coming back. So yeah, it's a much different effect in the long term.
Interesting. Well, Theresa, thank you so much for your time today. Can you share with folks what your top three things you want to leave, top of mind for them are?
Sure. I guess like when I'm thinking about professionals in the world, I think that some of the most important things are taking the time to slow down. I know that's so anti today's busy culture,
Mm.
but sometimes literally all it takes to change your entire day is just a really good deep breath. One of my favorites is to just breathe in through the nose and kind of press on either side of your sternum as you do it, and you can get a much deeper breath. Just In through your nose and out through your mouth. And just give yourself a second to get things together. And then to just tap into your intuition so that you really can make decisions from a centered place and not just that chaotic place. And even if you're not familiar with how to do EFT tapping, I guess this would be number 3, you can be having a moment and having, some kind of emotions, or maybe you're, ranting to somebody about whatever. Just tap one spot. Just grab that collarbone spot while you are ranting or talking on the phone to your husband or your mom or your friend or whoever about whatever's going wrong right now. You will regulate so much just with that one point, or the back of your neck or something like that. And just, it will release the need to probably talk about it 3 more times to 3 other people. And maybe you can just get it done with in that one conversation. So those are just 3 little tips that I think have been very helpful for me and other people.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. How can folks find more about what you do or reach you?
Absolutely. So my website is the same as my name. It's theresalearlevine.com. And you and I are going to do some tapping. So the best place for people to go is going to be theprivatesessions.com, where you can grab this awesome resource that is full of tapping sessions. Not only ours are going to be in there, but there's dozens on all sorts of different topics. So I always recommend grab the resource, choose a topic that resonates with something that's challenging you in your life, and press play. And I know that people are definitely going to want to press play on ours because it will be relevant to what we've talked about today. And I know they're going to want to see you get a shift trying this out too, because I know this is new to you, and we're going to have some fun doing it together. So that would be the best places that people could find out more about what I do.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you so much for your time and being here today.
Thank you, Jenna. Appreciate it.
And to our audience, until next time, keep your organizations healthy.